Hi guys, welcome back to Mysteries channel. Thank you for clicking on my video. Today's video is not the video I wanted to present to you. I had a video planned out and I thought all my little strings were tied up in a nice bow on top of that box, and I lifted up the box and there was just a bunch of loose string at the bottom. So I have a little bit more research to do on that one, but it's a video that kind of ties the old world and the new world together, showing that the timeline is wrong for sure, and also that the ancients all knew of each other. All right, so instead today, because it's October, there's about a week left till Halloween, we're gonna go over some scary, spooky stories. All these stories involve outdoor sightings of something, and I'm gonna tell them all in the first person because that's how they were presented to me, but they're all said to be 100% true. So, let's get to it. My grandfather was a badass. He was born in Alberta, Canada during the early 30s. He raised his 3 brothers on a reservation from the time he was 9 years old when his parents left for BC with their only daughter, promising to return. None of those boys ever saw them again. To make ends meet, he learned carpentry and worked as a laborer. He bare-knuckle boxed older gentlemen for extra cash. He learned how to track and hunt and always came home with something to eat when work was scarce. When he was 14, he put the second oldest brother in charge of the household, left the res in search of his parents and a better life. He never went back. That was the last time he saw any of the members of his family. He spent several months riding the trails, befriending some of the transients while using his fighting skills to defend himself from others. He eventually made his way to Vancouver, the last known whereabouts of his parents and sister, and started working at a pulp mill. At 17, he met my grandmother, and the two eventually married, leading him to give up his search for his family. They bought some land, and he spent his free time building several houses, which still stand to this very day. On this land, my grandparents kept horses and dogs and small farm animals for meat and eggs. My aunt was born in the early 1950s, and my mother came along right before the end of the decade. As far as I've heard, nothing bad or strange ever happened to them out there until my mom found an old Ouija board and played with it by herself, but that is not to do with this story. When my mother was around 8 years old, she was riding her horse through the wooded part of the acreage when the horse suddenly stopped dead in its tracks. My mom tried to spur it on, but the horse was frozen in fear, and all of a sudden, my mother smelt something that smelled like rotting garbage or meat. She pulled back on the reins and the horse instantly turned and took off towards the house, almost knocking her off the horse several times along the way. Afterwards, the horse was never the same again. It lost its damn mind. It would kick her every time she tried to get on it, or it would fall backwards and try to crush her beneath it. Once, it started acting like its old self again, letting her climb onto it, but once she got onto it, it ran towards the road and stopped abruptly, bucking her forward into the path of an oncoming car. My grandpa saw it happen. He pulled a shotgun right to its head. That horse just kept staring straight, breathing heavily, never moving its eyes. My mother barely missed being run over by that car. That car somehow saw the horse and at the last second was able to swerve out of the way. My grandmother begged my grandfather not to shoot the horse. He finally decided to give it away when he saw that my mother wasn't too badly injured. That same horse fell on the next person to ride it, breaking her collarbone, and that girl's father did what my grandpa said he should have done the first time. And after that, animals started going missing. One day, one of the hunting dogs was injured during an attack at night. My grandfather set out traps and stayed in a hayloft above the barn with a shotgun and a rifle beside him. He slept out there for several nights. He figured it was foxes, maybe it was coyotes or even wolves, maybe even a desperate bear, which is what he attributed to the smell in the woods, to that horse's reaction and why it lost its mind. But nothing came the entire time he slept out there, and eventually he figured it had moved on to easier prey, or maybe it even died. The day after he stopped sleeping in that barn, my mom was out near the tree line playing with the injured dog that was healing. Out of nowhere, the dog started sniffing in the air. Then it positioned itself between my mom and the trees, growling and barking. My grandpa, he heard the noise and he came out, stopped in his track and called back to my grandmother, telling her to bring his rifle. He then whistled for the dogs. My grandma came out. She handed him his gun, then asked what was going on. As this is happening, all the dogs start acting like the first one, and my grandfather, he points to the treetops, which looked longer and thicker than those around it, and there was something in it, something that was just slightly moving. It was about 6 feet tall, he told me later on, and sometimes when he would retell the story, he'd say it was probably even a bit bigger than that. He took aim, and just as he's getting ready to fire, he sees a pair of wings start to open. He shoots. Whatever was up there was watching him, but he beat it to the punch. It was a kill shot directly in the chest with a high-powered rifle, and he instantly started running with all the dogs following him as that thing comes plummeting down to the ground. You can hear the unmistakable breaking of branches, large branches. When he reached the impact point, he raised his rifle again and commanded the dogs to rush it forward to try to flush it out. But they all just stood in the circle and started spinning around trying to catch a scent that seemingly disappeared. A pile of broken branches lay in the obvious landing spot, but beyond that, there was no proof that anything had happened. No body, no blood, no trail. It had either disappeared or gone straight back up the way it came. He searched those woods for several days, but never found a sign of what that thing was. And after that point, he didn't see it or experience issues with that or even any of the other animals. It kind of fades into the background, but it's still a story that gets told. Decades later, when my grandfather was dying, he kept talking about how he saw something. And in his delirium, he referred to it as an alien. He said it was coming back for him. I've never seen that man scared of anything in my life, but there was an actual fear and panic in his voice. A few nights before he died, he had already been too weak to stand on his own for several days. My grandmother awoke to the sound of a gunshot. She ran outside fearing the worst and saw my grandpa lowering his rifle, staring at something in the distance. She took the gun away and she helped him back inside, and that was it. I don't know if whatever it was actually did come back for him or if it was a hallucination of an old memory, but I'd like to think he went out with a final fuck you to that thing that tried to torment his family all those years ago. I grew up with a family that always hunted. As soon as I could walk, I was hunting. I loved it. It was one of my favorite things to do. I would go with my dad, I would go with my grandfather, I would go with my friends and their fathers. On my 19th birthday, I wanted to go with my grandfather. That was about a year ago. What I'm going to tell you about now is something I cannot get out of my mind. I don't think it will ever go away. So about a year ago, on my 19th birthday, we walked through the woods in the backwoods of Montana. I finally get to a point in a clearing, and me and my grandfather, we stop dead in our tracks as we look across, and we see a deer standing near a rock, slamming its head and antlers into the rock over and over again with all of its force. It had shattered its antlers and its skull. And once its brain started to leak out, it just tried to lick them up, even though it could barely use its tongue or its jaw. At this point, we gasp, I gag, and we just stood there. And I almost feel like this deer hurt us because it stood up like a fucking human and it walked over into the river and it died. We left immediately, me and my grandfather. I'm still gagging. My grandfather, he's terrified. I've never been in those woods since. My grandfather, he moved. He moved to Florida with my grandmother. I'm never going in the woods again. Okay, so I've never in my life seen something so strange and so wrong as I did about 3 months ago. I live in the very deep part of the woods in the southern United States. We have a large assortment of wild animals, and I've seen nearly everything that lives in this forest. Well, everything except for this thing. It was the end of March at 1 a.m. on a Friday night, and I just dropped my friend off at his house after we had hung out. I'm driving on this long stretch of back road that's about 4 miles away from my house, and it's completely filled with forest. The only interesting part of this drive is that there's a very sharp left turn at the halfway point. It also has a large incline that also has a turn as well. Lots of accidents happen here, but that's besides the point. Because of this incline, there's a little sort of valley that you can look directly into and shine your headlights into and get a clear view of everything. Well, once I hit that point in the valley, my headlights come up and I got a clear view of something. There was this sort of creature about the size of a wolf that was completely hairless, had yellow, ugly skin that clung to its extremely skeletal body. It had a very small, almost cat-like head and face attached to its long, large body, and it seemed like all of its appendages were once broken and healed back wrong, everything at weird angles and points. The worst part was its eyes, though. Huge eyes, like human eyes that didn't shine back like an animal should in direct light. It looked at me as I passed by. I sped the hell away from that thing. And I went home and I locked the door. I told my mom what had happened, and she said it was light. Maybe it was an illusion or something. Light messing with your eyes. And I believed her too. I had to believe her. I tried to put it out of my head. But the bigger issue was the next day when I went back to go get my friend and what I saw. About the same spot where I saw that thing, I came across a half-eaten, gored corpse of a bear. I could see its ribs. The bottom half of its body was gone. That bear corpse wasn't there the night before. What can eat and gore out a bear in one night? What could eat and gore a bear? I don't know what I saw that night, and I hope to God I never see it again. I hope that it's not real. I wish I imagined all of it. I will try not to drive on that stretch of road again. Well, what do you guys think about that? I know that when I did my werewolf video, I kind of made it seem like it was just a cult of people that were obsessed with, I don't know, being able to go into a manic state during battle. But in reality, there's a lot of different things out there, a lot of different stories where people really believe what they're telling you. Like they've seen things, they know things. These stories just continue throughout the ages. I mean, honestly, that last one totally sounded like a skinwalker to me, which is almost kind of like the werewolf tale of the Americas, right? I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys have a very great day. Happy almost Halloween.